Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you're here at our first talk of the Berkeley Arts and Design speaker series, our Monday speaker series. We are so excited to host this talk tonight, given by Lisa Reihana. How can a Maori girl recolonize the screen using mighty pixels? Tonight's event is co-sponsored and hosted by the Berkeley Art Museum and Film Archive, and also the Berkeley Center for New Media. I just wanted to welcome the students of Humanities 20 who are part of this class. It's a unique kind of speaker series in that it involves a class and various partners who put on the event. So the Berkeley Office of Arts and Design is a really wonderful it's not a new organization, it's been around for quite some time, and we fortify and mobilize existing excellence in the arts and design at UC Berkeley while fostering dynamic collaboration, innovation, and public programming across all the arts and design fields on campus. And as I said before, this event is co-sponsored with the Berkeley Center for New Media, which is a focal point for research and teaching about new media, led by a highly transdisciplinary community of 120 affiliated faculty advisors and scholars from 35 UC Berkeley departments and units. So we're so excited to be able to co-sponsor this event. And before we begin tonight, I just want to introduce my esteemed colleague, the director of BCNM, Berkeley Center for New Media, Associate Professor Abigail DeKosnik. She researches popular media, particularly digital media, film and television, and fan studies. And she is interested in how issues of feminism, queerness, ethnicity, and transnationalism intersect with new media studies and performance studies. So I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Abigail DeKosnik, who will do our land acknowledgement and introduce our speakers tonight. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you everybody for coming tonight. We are about to launch this fantastic event as part of the Berkeley Center for New Media's Arts, Technology, and Culture Colloquium. My name is Gail DeKosnik, and I'm the director of BCNM, an interdisciplinary research center, as Lisa said, that studies and shapes media transition and emergence from diverse perspectives. Our Art, Technology, and Culture Colloquium, founded in 1997 by Ken Goldberg, a professor here at UC Berkeley and in BCNM, is an internationally respected forum for creative ideas. Free and open to the public, it presents leading artists, writers, and critical thinkers who question assumptions and push boundaries at the forefront of multiple intersecting fields. And last year, we at BCNM started an Indigenous Technologies initiative and have slated some of our Indigenous tech events in the Art, Technology, and Culture Colloquium, and tonight's event is one of them. And our Indigenous Technologies program explores questions of technology and new media in relation to global structures of indigeneity, settler colonialism, and genocide in the 21st century. This year, the theme of Indigenous Technologies is braided throughout our event season, and we're so excited to continue to build on this program and to host speakers who can help maintain and create this body of knowledge about Indigenous technologies. So we would like to open with just a few community agreements. BCNM is committed to promoting technological equity and justice, and as such, our free events are inclusive, respectful, and harassment-free spaces. We do not tolerate hate speech or Zoom bombing. Attendees who violate any of our community guidelines will be removed from the event and may be disallowed from future online BCNM events. So if you are new to our events, please read our community agreements, and we will share a link to those in the chat right now. And now we'd like to take a moment to honor the land. We recognize that Berkeley is located in the territory of Huichin, the ancestral and unceded lands of Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone peoples, specifically the confederated villages of Lishan. The history of prolific technological development in this region has always depended on this land, and all of our technological infrastructures and activities take place on and in relation to this land. We commit to supporting the sovereignty and ongoing stewardship of this place by Ohlone peoples through building long-term reciprocity and relationships with tribal leaders and organizations. We encourage all our attendees to explore native-land.ca, the website that is called Our Home on Native Land, to learn about the native stewards of the land you're joining us from. And you can find more information about, you can find our land acknowledgement and more information about our Indigenous Technologies program and commitments on our website, the bcnm.berkeley.edu website. So tonight we are very pleased to host the brilliant Lisa Reihana with generous co-sponsorship from the Arts Research Center and the American Indian Graduate Program in collaboration with Arts Plus Design Mondays, as Lisa said, a regular weekly series organized and sponsored by UC Berkeley's Arts Plus Design initiatives. So Lisa Reihana is a multidisciplinary artist whose practice spans film, sculpture, costume and body adornment, text, and photography. Since the 1990s, she has significantly influenced the development of contemporary art and contemporary Maori art in New Zealand. She has earned an outstanding reputation as an artist, producer, and cultural interlocutor with her attention to the complexities of contemporary photographic and cinematic languages expressed in myriad ways. Her ability to harness and manipulate seductively high production values is often expressed through portraiture, where she explores how identity and history are represented and the intersections of these ideas with concepts of place and community. Lisa represented New Zealand at the Venice Biennale in 2017 with a large-scale video installation In Pursuit of Venus Infected, and the work premiered at the Auckland Art Gallery in May 2015 and has since become a seminal work in New Zealand's art history canon. In Pursuit of Venus Infected has since been shown around the world and garnered widespread critical acclaim. In 2014, Lisa was awarded an Arts Laureate Award by the Arts Foundation of New Zealand and the Te Tohu Toiki Te Waka Toi Maori Arts Innovation Award from Creative New Zealand in 2015. And in 2018, she was made a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit. I first saw Lisa's amazing work In Pursuit of Venus Infected at the Venice Biennale 4 years ago, and I was thunderstruck. I spent a very long time in the exhibition gallery trying to take in every detail of the giant moving panorama that integrated live costumed performers reenacting scenes of colonization with the colorful paintings of an early 19th century French wallpaper. And I was not the only person who spent an hour or more walking back and forth along the wall of screens, staring at the myriad of tiny nuances, as well as the massive and massively impressive techniques and statements that Lisa incorporated into this thrilling digital masterpiece. I was lucky enough to see In Pursuit of Venus Infected again in my own city, San Francisco, a couple of years ago when the De Young Museum acquired it. And I'm so excited to be able to hear from her tonight, the artist herself tonight, and for her to share her wisdom and genius with our BCNM and Arts Plus Design and BAM PFA and other audiences. So please join me from wherever you are in welcoming the great Lisa Reihana.
Kia ora koutou katoa. It is a great pleasure and an honour to have this opportunity to speak with you. I'm talking to you from Aotearoa. That's the Maori name. Gifted, or New Zealand is how we're understood in other places in the world. But Aotearoa was named by a woman. And so it's certainly over the last 10, 20 years become the popular name of the country upon whose lands I stand. So I wanted to thank everybody for spending some time with me here today, and just to also recognise I imagine people on many lands, many homelands, but certainly the Orlane or Lone homelands. And what I'm going to do is, let me just get my screen share going. Make sure it's ready. Okay, and I'm just, whoops. Always hard to get these things going. Let me move that. So I hope that you can now see the screen that I'm sharing. And what I wanted to do for you was to show you Te Reo Māori, or our Maori language, sitting alongside an English translation. And what this piece of text is talking about is the tribal homelands that I belong to through my father's lineage. So he's of the Ngāpuhi tribe, and this particular piece of writing talks about a series of mountains, or maunga as we know them in New Zealand. And the story goes that if you're born within the 7 mountains in the far north of the North Island, you can indeed lay claim to being of the Ngāpuhi tribe. And Ngāpuhi are a confederation of tribes, of smaller groups called hapu. And I thought it was useful to share some insights about the context that I come from and New Zealand's history. So here in New Zealand, I like to think of us as teenagers, in that it is the last large land mass in the world that was colonised by people. So we hail, Maori people hail from the Pacific, and the Pacific over hundreds of years was peopled and populated, and New Zealand was the very last place to be populated. The way that the ocean currents run meant that many of our canoes, our waka, arrived at the top of the North Island. And that's to do with the underlying, if you look at bathymetric maps or maps of the ocean floor, there is a very particular way that boats are pushed down towards New Zealand. And this certainly happened in the late 1700s and early 1800s, when the first explorers arrived on our shores in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So that's kind of a quick backdrop to why I'm Ngāpuhi and what these names mean. But Pūhanga, the first name up there, Pūhanga Tohoro Titiro ki te Ramaroa. Pūhanga is the name of the mountain that I hail from through my Ngāpuhi lineage. I will move through and just really, I wanted to think about and share with you some of the influences that have really shaped my practice. I went to an art school in 1984 was when I first arrived in art school. I didn't actually know what an art school was, but I had a great teacher called Beverly Austin, and she said to me, you should go to art school because you'll really enjoy it. So I just, I don't know, blind faith, I'm often jumping in feet first. It was one of the reasons why I ended up going to art school. And then during that time in the 80s, the 1980s, there was a real push from all levels, all sorts of communities and leaders pushing for recognition of Maori culture, Maori language. And I think importantly at that time, there were a number of people who were working into theatre and certainly radio and broadcasting, because they understood if you could get your hands on these tools and have a way of broadcasting and popularizing and just kind of normalizing our imagery, our language, and our stories, that it would really change New Zealand from being very much a British colony into something much richer. So I think it's lovely to start with an image of Ramai Hayward. She's standing there recording with a microphone in her hand. Now, Ramai Hayward is an incredible woman. She was an early star of the silent movies and ended up marrying a filmmaker, a director. And together they went on to create lots of documentaries and stories together. But what I loved about her was she was her own boss. She opened her own photographic studio in Devonport, which is a small suburb here in Auckland. And she also was, she could also run a 4-minute mile. She was just one of these incredibly beautiful, smart, clever, gorgeous women. And so for me, when I first started hearing about Ramai and when I first became interested in early on, it was animation rather than filmmaking, she definitely became a hero to me. Beside her is an image of Merata Mita. I hope that you may have heard her name previously. She is an incredible Maori filmmaker who has passed, but was the first woman to do a feature film. Very strong political activist, really cut her teeth as New Zealand started to bring in a Maori branch to our one TV station that we had at that time in the 1987. And so she was a reporter and then became a director and then branched out of that state system to go on to make many, many films and was based in America and has done a lot of work up in Canada and has become a real leading light in the indigenous filmmaking community. So if you don't know who Merata is, certainly look at her and research her, because she's a very, very strong advocate and somebody that all our Maori communities and beyond look towards for her trailblazing. Besides that image, there's quite a number of men, and I've just privileged these women because I just can. But I also wanted to make mention of Barry Barclay. I met him when I was in art school, and there was a network of filmmakers and broadcasters at that time. Barry Barclay has written a very interesting book called Camera on the Shore. And that title, as that title suggests, and something that really influenced In Pursuit of Venus, which I will share with you a little bit further on, is the difference of the colonizers and the colonized. And so the camera on the shore privileges the indigenous people standing on the land, looking at people coming towards you. He was a great intellectual and philosopher and filmmaker. And this particular image that I chose shows him, he did a very important early series documenting some elders before they passed, but using techniques of telephoto lens, so that the intimacy and the storytelling that he was able to evoke from his sitters wasn't influenced by the feeling of having a camera in your face. Because like many different indigenous cultures around the world, there was always a suspicion about the lens-based arts and cameras and how they might steal your soul, etc. So he came up with quite a different methodology in terms of working with elder people, elder men and women, and recorded some wonderful histories and stories which remain to this day. I was thinking about at this time when there was this big development and advocating to New Zealand government for airtime on through radio and on television. The first thing that New Zealand or Maori were granted were 4 minutes of Maori news, and it grew from there to the point today that we have 2 completely Maori language stations. But at that time, I was asked if I would be interested in training and becoming part of, I suppose, the television broadcasting world. And I decided that I felt that through my training within an art school, that I could create another space, another place that our imagery could recolonise. And it was very much driven too from my interest in books and images that I was seeing of video artists from overseas. It's really important to note that for New Zealand at that time, you know, when I was just going through art school and graduating, and in the year after that, there was very little video installation work. So I really had to develop quite a keen sense of imagination, reading texts about different video artists overseas and trying to get a sense of what they might look like, the scale of them, and the kind of content. So my reading and just looking at still images was my way of trying to understand what is this thing called video art. I've just thrown some images in there, stolen from the internet, I must say, must fess up. But when I in the early travelled, I was able to see an exhibition of Gary Hill's work, and I found this kind of utilisation of multiple screens really interesting. For me, it kind of fed into some new ideas around postmodernism, or seeing the same content from different viewpoints. I found that very interesting and something that I've embodied into my own work, albeit in a slightly different way and for different reasons. But certainly this idea of the body and identity, which is sort of all of these images here. Bill Viola, I mean, I find that really interesting, just that he's used the portrait form, and it's something that I've used in my early works. And it was quite funny when I was working with big video production houses. I'd often have some men going, "Tut tut, did you realise you turned the camera around the wrong way?" And you know, it was such a new idea within New Zealand, Aotearoa, that oftentimes production houses and where I was taking my work to show and screen, people didn't even really weren't even questioning the shape of the screen and the format that it was being presented on, and that you could atomize stories and create a more nuanced storytelling. So this is the sort of things that I was really becoming very interested in the 1980s. I really like the Tony Ursula images here, because I think what it does for me, it reminds me, the way that I kind of came to filmmaking was my sister ran the painting aspects of an animation studio. And she taught me how to do puddling, which is just a painting technique, which you would understand very much from those early Disney type of illustrations. But what I really found fascinating was we would film these cells, hundreds and hundreds of cells. We would probably spend 6 weeks painting in all the colours of the characters, and then the head animator would do the backdrops, and then we would put them on a big rostrum camera and shoot straight down. And I think what I found really fascinating was the ability to take still images and create a moving image and tell stories from that. And that it's had a sense of this magic. It's the magic that you can bring something to life. But also, I thought animation in my early work was definitely a strategy of creating an aesthetic, a sort of a look that appealed to both young and old audiences. So what I think I've tried to maintain that feeling, the feeling that the content that I create through my work can be enjoyed by different age groups, different understandings, but they can both look at the content at the same time and take something from it. So it's something that's really driven the works that I've made. What happened for me is the year after I finished art school, I was lucky enough to secure a residency, and this residency was in Sydney, Australia. So that's very close by to New Zealand. It takes 3.5 hours to fly there on a jet plane. But as I indicated, talking about Aotearoa, you know, the reasons that all the boats ended up on the top of the North Island, my feeling was the first time that I'd left home and had this 3-month residency to live in a different country. The hopes and aspirations of this residency was driven from photographic gallery and centre, and they were working with a new urban Aboriginal art gallery called Bumali. And the idea was to bring a Maori artist to Australia to meet Aboriginal communities in the year that there was the sesquicentenary of Cook's discovery of Australia. So it was a highly politicised moment to step out of New Zealand and into Australia. And what this did for me was introduce me to some incredible artists. I've just put a couple of people up here that I met during this time. Tracy Moffat, whom I hope you're well aware of. She was living in America for quite a number of years, but a great photographer and filmmaker. The other person was Michael Riley, and he too was a great photographer and filmmaker. So I think there's kind of interchangeability, these political discussions and these movements that were happening in the late 1980s really drove my interests, and I suppose in some ways really formed what I still think about today. So there's this image here on the top. Tracy Moffat's work is from a photographic series called Something More. I think it's made up of about 11 or 13 quite large, beautiful photographs. I made the Sydney Gallery show it while I was in residence. But what I loved about this particular series of works is it really told a strong story. Tracy is what you would call an Aboriginal person who's from the stolen generation. That's when the government of the days would steal children and farm them out. So she doesn't know who her parents were, but she knew the area that she comes from, her tribal homelands. And I think in these series of images, it's very a personal story that's embodied in it, but then also looking at the immigrant situation of Australia. At the bottom, Michael Riley, they're much more elliptical works, and he often worked in series, but was looking at imagery driven by Christianity and how much the churches influenced Aboriginal communities of that time. So what I found was really interesting was sort of stepping away from a documentary basis, but really looking into utilising the studio as a really productive place to suggest really different or alternative histories and stories. They're very quite high key colours, and I think they're, I urge you to have a look at their work. What those aspirations of a Maori girl, a Maori artist going to Australia and meeting with Aboriginal artists and Aboriginal communities is something that I've really taken to heart, and it's something that has come up again and again in my work, and it's something that I've spent, the distance is really close. It's the biggest land mass near New Zealand, so it's a really interesting art scene and place for me to work in. But it certainly sort of fits with some of the philosophies that I've heard and thought about over many years. And it was while I was in Australia that this Maori concept of tuakana teina, an elder and a younger, the mentor and the mentee, really kind of made sense to me, because it felt like, you know, I think New Zealand or Aotearoa is the youngest culture on earth, and we are right next door to the oldest culture on earth. There's, you know, it's now been proven, scientifically proven, that Aboriginal people have been on those lands for 60,000 years. So I think there's so much to be learned and shared between our cultures, and that's something that I'll come back to and share with you a bit further in. So just coming to me, I just wanted to give a little bit of context of some of the things that have shaped my work. These two images on screen are quite interesting to me. As I said, working in a studio is really, I mean, I kind of hate it. There's a green screen image here, and this is taken from In Pursuit of Venus, which you've heard a little bit about. And then on the left-hand side of screen is actually one of the first times I did an outdoor shoot for one of my short films. So I wanted to show these two very different ways of production methods. One of the things I love about a studio shoot, I talk about, I make pictures, I don't take them. So that's a kind of philosophical space that I try and hold. As I said, there's a lot of suspicion about lens-based arts. Perhaps at the turn of the century, or when it was the cameras were first being trained on indigenous people, there was this idea of stealing something from you. I think in more recent times, in the proliferation of the internet, you know, images can even more easily be stolen, so, and be taken and used out of context. So it's something that I think about a lot for myself, for my nieces and nephews, you know, the type of imagery that they have up on in the world, and just to be really aware of, once you create something, you can't uncreate it. Once you put it in a public space, it can disappear and go away from you, or people read it or can utilize things in different ways. So I think, particularly coming from an animation background, is thinking about, okay, how can we load these images up so that they convey something else beyond the context that they're sitting in. What do I mean by that? That they really clearly indicate that there's something more going on, and I'm always interested in the edges outside the frame that people can't see beyond. I'll start with In Pursuit of Venus, because this is a seminal work, and it's, you know, traveled a lot around the world. It really came from this kind of European aesthetic. This is an installation from a show I did over in Holland. It's in the Museum van Loon, and that's a very, very loaded and grand house that housed an exhibition. Museum van Loon was owned by the underwriter of was it the Dutch East India Company. So this room is based upon slavery, trade and exchange, money that was being brought into Holland from many, many different cultures and in many different places across Asia, into Africa, etc. And I chose, this is called the Drakenstein room, and this room makes sense to show the early version of this work because it's incorporates this hand painted wallpaper, these kind of scenes, scenes of empire and conquest. So the screens that are sitting on the table come from a first version of In Pursuit of Venus, And this was me really trialing and using this as a draft to think about how can I recreate this very, very large European wallpaper that inspired the making of it. The original European wallpaper does not include images of the explorers, people like Captain Cook, Joseph Banks, and all those that moved around the Pacific, and the so-called discoverers of the Pacific. It was a really great project to partake in, because through this I was able to share my knowledge that there was a waka, or a canoe, and this particular canoe that you can see is based on the one that is in our Māori, or our tribal homelands up north. And I told them, oh, there's been a waka that's been gifted to the Dutch government, and it's looked after by the Dutch Njord Rowing Club, who are a university rowing club. And what's really interesting about this this canoe, this waka, as the name that we use in the Pacific, is that it's a living gift from government to government. And there's an annual festival in New Zealand called the Treaty of Waitangi, or Waitangi Day, and it's the day that a treaty was signed between Maori and the government in 1840. And what happens is there's a Maori group who pay for 4 Dutch students to come to New Zealand and to come and learn about Maori, New Zealand in the context, by coming over and spending a few days. And those people are the ones who are tasked to look after this vessel while they're in university. And it's a great idea for a living document, because students are always leaving the university, so that idea of care and looking after something, learning the songs, teaching the local people how to row is left to the Dutch students. So while we had this exhibition at Museum Van Loon, I got the Dutch kids to teach me how to row a boat that's based on something that is from my homelands that I've never been in. And we moved it from Leiden, which is an hour outside of Amsterdam. And then at the opening ceremony of the exhibition, they came and picked me up on the steps of the Museum Van Loon, and I jumped into the waka, and then we went around the canals of Amsterdam. So that was really fun, and it was very much a Kodak moment, but an incredible sort of hybrid imagery that was happening. I mean, Amsterdam is a very beautiful, incredible city, 16th century, but as you can see, there's these 16th century rooms, and then there's these cars that line the streets, and then there's this this old waka from New Zealand. So In Pursuit of Venus has been a very interesting project to work on, because it has so many different aspects and so many different ways that people can interact with it. Now, that was an early version of the work, and I'll share some of this with you now so you can see. So what you've been looking at is the moment of Captain Cook's death. I don't know if I can even, I'm not even able to reel it back. Let's see if we can do that. And this is the final version of In Pursuit of Venus, in that it's called In Pursuit of Venus Infected, and I like to use the word infected, and even more now more than ever, the notion of bugs moving around the world at great speed is very cogent. But the infected to me was this idea that once you see something, you can't unsee it. Once you know something, you can't unknow it. And it was a reference to the bugs that were traveling around the world, but also the infected is my bringing in the European travelers into an original French scenic wallpaper, and they were never foregrounded. So they were never made really implicit in the kind of histories that have played out and to where we find ourselves today. So I'm not going to say too much more about this, but if you're interested in this work, I do have a website, and you can look at that up in Pursuit of Venus, I think it's .com. And on the website, there's a bit more detail about it, some background images and some installation shots from exhibitions that it's been included. But yeah, as I said, what I like about this work is it's appeared in multiple different places, shown as a very contemporary video installation, sometimes shown in museums alongside collections, but it's been a really great touchstone for other galleries to present work, and in a way that really questions and makes the audience question colonization for different peoples. I wanted to show this image here because these are just a couple of characters that are taken from In Pursuit of Venus, and as a way of me being able to raise funding as I was working on it. I spent 10 years creating that artwork amongst other things, but I wanted to extract some of these characters and then put my own wallpaper as a backdrop. That kind of diamond image is based on Maori weaving patterns, but certainly making these kind of explicit images around Parkinson, the types of characters that he went out and recorded. The fact that these artists, I mean, Captain Cook became so famous is because he had artists on the boat. So when the books came out, they were heavily illustrated. And this is why Captain Cook became so famous, because he had an illustrated account of his travels. People who couldn't travel could get a sense of these characters and these places, these landscapes far away. I wanted to show just a couple of other projects that I've done. Tai Whatuki, House of Death. For me, it's been great to be a filmmaker. It's offered the opportunity to really, as you know, I come from an urban background. My father left the far north due to the economies failing and outflung towns. So he came to Auckland, which is the biggest city in New Zealand. And when he was unwell, I took that opportunity to learn about where female practices, Maori women sit in the death rites. And so it was something that I began in Pursuit of Venus. I needed to look at these Maori death rites because I was presenting Captain Cook being killed on the beach so many times. And in that process, I made this incredible costume called the Chief Mourner costume from Tahiti. And this is an installation image from when it was shown in Australia. And then, you know, it's great. The opportunity of showing works in different contexts within different collections means that you can sort of go back to material and reshape it and kind of play with it, knowing where it's going to be put. So I was invited to be part of the Honolulu Biennale at the Bishop Museum, and I asked to show Taifatuki in the Bishop Museum because it had this terrible history of directors who were caught with their hands in the till, and you know, it is one of the premium places to look at Pacific material culture, and so I wanted to bring some love back to that place as a building. And I knew there was quite a big screen in the Pacific Hall, so I recut the initial single screen material and made it for a double-sided. This was projected on both sides, and then recreated it for this long hall space. I showed it in New Zealand. This image here on the left-hand side gives you a clearer sense of the Chief Mourner costume. It took me about 2 years to make this costume because I'd never seen one up until this point. I'd only seen a drawing and a couple of images, some photographs, but I recreated it for In Pursuit of Venus. And you know, the importance of making this film is In Pursuit of Venus has this French scenic wallpaper as a backdrop. I really wanted to see what this costume looked like in a real landscape, and so I took this, shot this film in quite an eerie and important place just outside of Auckland. So I'm just going to show you a little bit. So this particular work, you know, I was thinking about where women sit. This character on the right-hand side of the screen is Hine Nui Te Pō, and she is mostly understood as the goddess of death, but she's also the goddess of dreams. So the whole film is quite a psychic space. It was shot in a place where there was a big massacre, a Maori massacre outside of Auckland. So it really has quite a potent feeling to it. But I was thinking about what do women do in these ceremonies, and I love the idea, thinking about Hine Nui Te Pō. She's so important in in our Maori creation stories. The idea of the spirit takes 3 days. That's how long that we will do we do them a bit like an Irish wake. The body comes into the house, you spend time with it, you tell stories, people come to visit, people laugh and cry and eat, and it's sort of like a celebration. It's a really nice way of dealing with grief. But I love this idea that there's a woman there to greet you after you've transited, moved across that body, gone from spirit across a body of water, and then taken into the house where you're looked after by Hine Nui Te Pō. The Maori creation stories have really loomed large in my oeuvre. And one of the other important female deities is Papatūānuku. So I have Papatūānuku as exemplified by Nancy Weejohn. She's dancing on a crystal. I was, you know, sometimes the women's stories, we always hear the men's and the more heroic aspects of them, but not so much amplifying the female aspects. And that's something that I wanted to bring to the fore. So it was clearly understood that Papatūānuku, she's the mother of all. She had 70 sons, and these sons are kind of related to natural phenomena that we see in the world around us. So on the right-hand side of the screen is Tane, and Tane is the god of the forest, and he's the one that pushed his parents apart. But it's little known that not only did she have 70 sons, she also had 70 daughters. So there's always a balance in these kind of philosophies. So what I wanted to do was show Papatūānuku, or the Earth Mother, as being, I thought, oh my God, she must have been pregnant the whole time. And I don't know, I've often seen images, whether they're in carvings, of her with strings of her children underneath her, but not really so much understood as a pregnant woman. So he tells these creation stories, or sort of visualizes these creation stories, and they are very well known. You're told them as a child, and as you get older, it's really nice to unpick. I don't like the word mythologies because I don't think it's it makes it kind of fantasy, whereas for us, I see this as kind of documentary, revisualizing or restaging something for a documentary. But I like the opportunity that these, you know, working on these projects gives me, and how I can share them with an audience. So the reason you're seeing 2 screens is this was made for it's a very large public artwork. The screen's about 9 meters high. You can see them from 2 floors. But, you know, for me, you can tell a lot even just in a simple image. So we went down to the centre of the North Island where there's a lot of volcanic activity. Behind her is quite a large, this is the site of a geyser, it's a female geyser. And in our Maori storytelling, when Papatuanuku died, she still had one child left in her belly, and that's Ruamohu. And so the story of him is he is the one that creates volcanic eruptions and earthquakes. So just by putting these two kind of images together really helps people understand that kind of Maori storytelling, how it relates to the natural world, and I suppose just bringing a human face to these very important characters. A couple of years ago, I got the opportunity to shoot a 3D film called Nomads of the Sea. You know, after making In Pursuit of Venus, it's been, you know, this voyage of discoverers and really brave people who've launched off into unknown territories has been really interesting to me. These are just a couple of production stills. I was able to blag my way into working down in Wellington in Sir Peter Jackson's, using his facilities. And actually this image on the right-hand side is an incredibly expensive piece of kit. It's his 3D camera. And we use this to tell the story of Charlotte Badger. So Charlotte Badger is a sketchy character. She was the first European woman to live in New Zealand, in Aotearoa, and she lived under the protection of a Maori chief. So, you know, I'm a mixed race. My dad's Maori, but my mother is English and Welsh and Jewish. So these kind of dualities really play out, and you know, I think about them a lot. How do I not only represent my father's culture, but you know, where does it intersect with my mum? So it was really fantastic to discover the story about Charlotte Badger, because she ended up stealing. She was taken from England as a thief, and then brought down to the Antipodes. She was put in the Parramatta Women's Prison, and then transferred to what they call a female factory. And then in 1805, she managed to steal a boat called Venus and bring it to New Zealand, to Aotearoa. So I love this as like a great piece of history. It's almost like, you know, it's a great story. But for me, it was an opportunity, because there's not so much known about her. Some people even question whether she is a real character. But for me, it made me think, well, at one point in time, there was the first European woman to live in New Zealand. What kind of qualities would she need to survive? And what were, because I know Maori women's circumstances were very different back then. Before colonisation, women, you know, we had this, not that it was a matrilineal society, but there was much more equality. And post-colonisation, you know, women have suffered a great deal. So to look at this period in time is really interesting. And this particular work in 1804 is the same year that Joseph Dufour made the wallpaper that In Pursuit of Venus is based on. So it's kind of really dancing around these histories and looking at them from different directions as well. You know, I often start with a single screen, and then as I get more money, add to it and add to it. So I created a 3-channel work for a Biennale last year. And what I did was just use those screens to suggest the context of the places that these women inhabited, whether they're on the ocean, or what the bush in New Zealand looked like before it's been tamed and changed and shaped so much. But also I could put a dream sequence in there and add some kind of historical texts. So the work at the Sydney Biennale, used 3 large screens, which was sort of set just like this. And I'm just going to play a little sequence for you.
When the first ships came, the worth of the smallest bit of iron was so much you may think I exaggerate. The immense excitement caused by a ship seen off the coast. Where would she anchor? What iron could be got? Can we seize her? Preparations were made to follow her along the coast, even through enemy country.
Korero wa toku mamai matuku tia.
E hana ia koe tēnei wai! Hoi anō, ko tāku e titiro!
Sorry, hard cut there. It's actually really nice for me to see these works myself, because sometimes, well, oftentimes I don't have access to 3 projectors. I don't see them. So what we did is lay them all side by side just to make sure that our timing was correct when we were doing the editing process. But certainly it's really interesting to mine your own material and see what else you can do with it and take it into a more installation-based presentation. Working on this project was really fantastic for me because it's a number of times it's like looking at language too. How I'm not a native speaker. It was banned during all the years that my father was going through the education system, and is, you know, it's really important. It's Maori Language Week here in New Zealand right now, and the hope is all the next generation of people going through will pick up the language and amplify it and utilize it. But for me, it's I find it really difficult. You know, I'm not hardwired for as a linguist. I'm so busy thinking about visuals and audio, but mostly visuals, that I've tried to pick it up, and I know a little bit, but not a lot. So it's, you know, these are the kind of pains that sit with myself and my people. But working on this project was really complex, and, you know, it was a really great one to kind of get my teeth stuck into from a technical perspective, because I do like technology, but it needs to be there for some reason. So you need to imagine that this projected really large and in 3D is quite, the fight sequences are incredible. It's really nice to, you know, wonder, why is this European woman speaking in a foreign language? Why does she know that? It was my thinking around, perhaps she was linguistically gifted, and that's why she managed to keep her life. And it begins, that first opening image, with the guns. You know, the muskets were really important in New Zealand as we were being colonised. To have muskets made you powerful, but it also, for the first time, you know, and historically we do more hand-to-hand combat, and wars were sort of a seasonal thing. So with the introduction of muskets, there was a huge loss of life and a really big shift. It actually, in the end, privileged Europeans, and that, along with the various smallpox and influenza that were transiting around New Zealand at the time, was a really important power struggle between Maori and the Europeans, between Maori and Maori, and with these health statistics and these guns. So, you know, things really haven't changed that much at all, funnily enough. Look, this is my last slide, because oftentimes people are asking me, what am I going to do next? And I've been looking always very much to the past and to my own culture to find the stories within those. But Ground Loop is a commission for a new gallery that is currently being built in Sydney for the Sydney Modern. And I wanted to kind of put together a more future-centered vision. And it's really, my partner James posed the idea, why didn't Maori, who are such great ocean travelers, why did they stop in New Zealand and not continue and do that last little connection back to Australia? So this project is really building upon the recurrence in this new ocean navigation using traditional techniques. And it's posing this question of, if we landed on the shores of Botany Bay or on the shores of Australia now, would we be welcome? It started off as quite a dystopian theme, but given what's happening with COVID and the fires that, you know, they have terrible forest fires in Australia too, I decided I wanted to create a very hopeful message, particularly if I'm creating an artwork that's going to sit on a screen for multiple years and play on a loop endlessly. I wanted to pose a more hopeful kind of story. And so this is just, you know, a couple of stills that I've thrown together. I've been sitting in the last year, all of this year, rewriting, planning, creating images, creating costumes, developing a futuristic waka or craft to take us on this journey from Aotearoa to Australia. And because of COVID, I find myself in a really interesting situation where if I can't get to Australia, how can I undertake a filming with Aboriginal peoples? So, and also get permission. So this is something that is fundamental to a lot of our practice. As an Indigenous person, you need to ask permission to create works before you can even go about creating them. So this is the moment that I find myself in. So I'm going to exit out of that image there and stop share because that's kind of pretty much where I got to. And I just wondered, and now we can throw it open, and if there's any discussions or comments, I'm very happy to take those now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lisa. Oh, I just noticed I'm appearing and disappearing on my Zoom screen. So let me try to fix that while I talk. Please, everybody, put your questions in the Q&A box. You'll see at the bottom of your Zoom screen Q&A. So just press that button and then type your questions. And I will be so happy to read your questions out loud. Of course, we may get more questions than we have time for. So apologies to anyone who asked a question if we don't have time to get to it, but I certainly hope that we do. Okay, so we do have one question, and lots of people are posting. Thank you so much. So that's wonderful.
Nice.
Thank you for expressing your appreciation for this marvelous talk, and it really was awesome. And thanks so much for showing us some of your work that, you know, many of us don't have the chance to see, not living in Pacifica. So it's so cool to not only see the works that have traveled globally, but the ones that are newer or more local. It's so great to have the chance to see your brilliant, more recent work. Okay, so we have a question from Yasmin. Thank you so much for speaking. Can you speak about how you differentiate between decolonization and recolonization in your work?
Oh, gee. It's hard to describe because it's probably more a feeling sometimes. And, you know, like when you're developing projects, and I think it's actually quite a fine line. It's really hard. I mean, I suppose the more you know, it's almost like double trouble to know how to take that material and what are you going to put into the public realm. And that's when I mean it's taken away from me, and I work, not that I ever say something's finished, because I like the idea, and I like to retain the idea that I can keep pushing something, because sometimes you don't know how people are going to react when you take it to the public. So sometimes you do need to have this moment of a re-edit, in the sense that maybe something is not hitting exactly as you might want it to, or be read in the way that you might want it to. I don't know that I can answer that question very well for you, Yasmin, but it's more to do with the feeling. And I'm often, you know, I know also that sometimes I'm including content in my works that may not have, I might not have been able to practice best practice, you know, in terms of getting permissions or talking to lots of people and feeling that I can include that material in a work. Apart from the fact that one of the things, or a sort of a position that I needed to come to for my own self was, I think that oftentimes Indigenous people, or not just Indigenous people, different communities also, I mean, there's so many different communities who have a story to tell. But if you feel like your ability to speak or share is taken away, or you may not be able to get the correct permissions to include it, but if you don't include it, you're going to miss out on a whole lot of opportunities. That's kind of a yardstick that I might use in order to decide what might go into a work. And it's certainly not a perfect position, but I definitely feel that so many times people have their ability to speak be taken away. Now, it was sort of something that even came up in Pursuit of Venus. You know, I was remaking scenes and working with local actors and non-actors here in Aotearoa in New Zealand. And of course, Captain Cook, he met his demise. He was killed, or he died in Hawaii. I didn't have Hawaiian actors available to me at that point in time when I was recording those particular scenes. And so the chant that you're hearing is there's Samoan and Tongan, and there are different Pacific languages. And I really had to struggle with myself to decide whether to just turn the sound off and just see people like lip syncing and no audio being there, and not including that language. So I came to the position that I didn't want to take anyone's voice away again when so many people have lost their language, and that also we are children of our ancestors, and so, you know, it's almost like that language is coming through you. So they are really big philosophical points to arrive at, and I'm hoping that might give Yasmin an indication of some of the thinking and some of the struggles that you have to come to terms with when you're taking work to an audience.
Oh, thank you so much. I feel like that generates yet more questions. Such a rich vein of thought, great. Okay, speaking of the sound element in your piece, we have two questions about sound. Yair asks, I noticed from the clips we watched that sound design is also a powerful factor in the films. What has influenced the choices made for this? Is there an aspect of Aboriginal music that goes into this too? And Marcelo, who was the first Indigenous tech coordinator for BCNM last year, thank you, Marcelo, for coming tonight. Marcelo says, thank you for visiting and sharing your brilliant work. I'm wondering if you could speak more to your use of sound and its relationship with the visual. I noticed a lot of very powerful engagements with silence, intense soundscapes, as well as spoken language itself. Can you speak a bit more about how you approach sound design in your work? So two quite similar questions about the same theme. Yeah, could we hear your thinking around sound design in your pieces?
Certainly, I just say that I end up making films just so I can go and sit in the recording studio, because I absolutely love, I love music, I love sound, I love audio. For me, it is equal weight in terms of the storytelling. A good soundtrack puts you in it takes you to a place. It's a body thing. You embody what those kind of sounds do to you. So I initially, this idea of silence and not using language relates to the fact that I'm not a native speaker. So I keenly feel that loss. And it was something that I employed a lot in my earlier works, is this aspect of silence. But equally, as a storyteller, you can convey ideas to the audience with a well-crafted soundtrack, sound design. So these are things that I'm always playing with. And also, I'm glad one of your questions picked up on this idea of Aboriginal musicianship. We have a word called taonga puoro, and that is Maori instruments. It's a sort of catch-all phrase for these traditional Maori instruments. Now, they were banned from being used very, very early on, after New Zealand was colonised. And now there are many, many practitioners over the past 20 years, but over the past 10 years in particular. This idea of those voices, the types of sounds that you get from these instruments, they replicate bird sounds or the wind, because the wind might indicate a feeling or a spiritual aspect. There were particular instruments that were used to play over the pregnant belly. It's kind of a beautiful instrument, and it kind of awakens the child before they even arrive into the world. Waiata were written and sung to a new child and enchanted as they were coming out. So that aspect of audio is really important. My partner James, he oversees the sound design, and we spend, he always complains that we spend more time looking at the visuals, but that's because they take so much longer to kind of create and edit and get out of the computer. But certainly we're always talking about sounds and making sounds to each other, because I love how it puts you makes you feel very much what's on screen. So thank you for those questions.
Great. All right. I also teach sound design at UC Berkeley, so I love hearing you talk about privileging sound, and I love your partner's remark, which is every sound designer's complaint, that lighting and visuals take up 90% of the process, and then the sound people come in and do everything they have to do with 10% of the time. Lily asks, how do you choose what origin stories to depict, and how do you choose which stories to pair with different aspects of the indigenous experience with colonization and its effects. I think that's about, you know, how do you choose which origin stories to sort of put into conversation with either the indigenous experience or with colonization. I think you could parse that a number of ways, but feel free to take it any direction you want to.
I think while you're working on a project, I mean, I love the research, and the research is really important to me because that's, you know, being an art, and I call myself an artist more than a filmmaker. I mean, I can call myself all sorts of things. I mean, I don't care. I just do what kind of interests me. But I think once you research, there might be something. I get really excited by a tiny little gem idea, and if I think it's not out there in the general world, and it's like from a female perspective or a cultural perspective, I go, oh, I sort of have to kind of tease my way into it. You know, traditionally you would have elders or knowledge people that you can go and speak to, and sometimes I do and sometimes I don't in my urban situation. And then certainly under COVID conditions, it's really difficult because those elders don't necessarily use Zoom, use the phone, you know, so you have to really have a great sense of imagination to sort of try and apply it to something that you know before, or, you know, like it's just a research tool, really. I'm visualizing what I'm trying to learn about. And then when I'm making projects, you might see something and it can, you don't, it's not part of the story that you're dealing with in that work, but it's something to return to. I often find, you know, sometimes I get commissioned to do something for a certain place. Someone will say, oh, we've got a building, we'd love you to make an artwork. You're a Maori. So it can be as super basic as that. And so what I might do is look at the histories of that location, and then through doing that investigation, lovely little gems arise out of that. But I'm hoping that you could see through a track that there are different aspects in all the works that cross back to each other. You know, the story of Charlotte Badger, really important to me because it's a female story. It talks about my European heritage, which I have not privileged, particularly in my work, but is very important, of course. But the fact that the ship that she stole was called Venus was just so interesting to me, that I was making In Pursuit of Venus, and that actually that's that history. They were actually made at the same time. These were concurrent events in different parts of the world, and the aesthetics were really, really different. So I thought there's an opportunity to kind of delve into it. Also, I mean, I suppose gender fluidity has always been important from a cultural perspective. You know, in our language, some words, you know, my niece, I couldn't, she said, I want to be known as a they, and I said, I don't like they. To me, it feels like it's an arm's length away. Whereas in Maori language, there's a word called iramutu, and that can be a male or a female. So, you know, picking up on these ideas and finding something that culturally works and sits well, and then also allows you to examine more of that culture, dive into those words, see what they mean, and use them in a daily sense. Maori language is a very interesting language. It's quite poetic, and when it was used in olden times, and you can break words down and then they will have other stories that come out of those words as well. So iramutu is what I call her, and then that becomes, but that gender fluidity is something that moves through all of my works. And the last piece that I showed, Nomads of the Sea, really important for me. Just the talent that I worked with, he's an in-between, a twin spirit character. Even like my working on Ihi, which is the image of Papatuanuku, and Tane, her son. You know, rather, you know, these are really important stories, but I wanted to show them from a an idea of whakapapa, different, the mother and the son, the love between them, but they're also twin spirit people. So I thought it's my little joke that we're looking at creation stories, and then we're also using twin spirit models to characterize them. So these layers of meaning that sort of, for me, sit not just the content that you arrive at, but things that sit around them. So you're sort of creating a space, a bigger space, a productive space that other people, some people who are keyed into it, can read that knowledge, that thinking. I don't know if I answered that very well, but
wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, we have so little time, but I want to get in this last question by TRA. TRA says, thank you for your presentation, and I loved hearing about the trajectory of your career. I'm reading TRA's statement now. I am a Hawaii Maori female artist filmmaker. As Cook was killed in Hawaii, what informed your decision positioning that event in a utopian Tahiti? How do you position the work as utopian here? I know you said Hawaiian actors weren't available, so would you consider expanding the work to include a Hawaii Maoli perspective on this major event?
okay, there's a lot of amazing things in there to unpack. Thanks, Tiare. And okay, so what were the first aspects of the question? Okay, so the utopian was another issue that I kind of struggled with in the making of In Pursuit of Venus, that it's and I didn't include an image of the wallpaper, so it's very useful to look at that wallpaper in the sense of I took it as a European document. And when I first saw that wallpaper and it said there was all these Pacific people represented in it, and I looked at it and I couldn't see them, like it was a very European idea of Pacific people. But I knew that the work had wide appeal. So I kept actually the form of the wallpaper and then reinscribed living ancestral people on it. So what's interesting about this utopian idea, and like the whole thing happens at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's a complete fiction, and I want people to see that kind of artifice that exists within it. But also, because it's sort of this utopian Tahiti, it's nowhere, but it's everywhere. And what it becomes is a platform upon which any person can stand and speak from, because it doesn't, in some ways, it doesn't privilege anybody, any particular culture. It's just the platform upon which these stories appear. So I like that aspect, that it's sort of it's incredibly artificial. I did think about remaking all the little segments of where these characters appear, but actually it was such it's really hard to convey how big that work is, because for those that haven't seen In Pursuit of Venus, that's a detail of a much bigger, it's much wider than that, and it was such a hard work to make that I did have to strip back some aspects of it so I could just concentrate on actually completing the work. And that in some ways is a cop-out, but in some ways not. I wouldn't remake that particular scene in that work, because I couldn't financially do that. But certainly what I've learned through the process of making it can be embodied into later works. And I would love to have an opportunity to spend some time in Hawaii. And I really want to actually return to Hawaii, because I think there's such strong synergies between our peoples. And there is a way of redressing that particular scene, probably in a different kind of a work at a different point in time. I did go back to the Honolulu Museum, and I knew that it was, it's less than perfect. But sometimes, it's hard to be perfect. But also those imperfections in some ways are the places that you can start another conversation, because that, in some ways, when something like when people feel it's, they see an artwork, oh, that's great, it's almost like there's nowhere else to go. Whereas I think those points, those problematic areas, are actually really productive spaces that other opportunities arise from. So my hope is, at another point in time, there will be a redress to that particular scene. And I have actually, in Tai Whatuki and a few other works, in some ways I am critiquing previous works that I've done, or my thinking has evolved. So I and yes and no, if that kind of makes sense. I hope that makes sense to you, Tiari. Yeah.
Lisa, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was so brilliant to be able to see your work, hear you talk about it, and share your ideas with us. Thank you, everybody who came tonight and is staying for the Q&A now. It's just a minute past 8, so we need to wrap up. So everybody have a wonderful evening, a wonderful week, and Lisa, Reihana, thank you so much. Please come to our future events. Bye, everybody. Good night.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was amazing.
Oh, good. I wasn't sure if it if you talk too quickly, if you know how sometimes the sound interferes. I was hoping I wasn't going too fast or too slow.
No, you definitely weren't. It was very easy to listen.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, you know what I mean. Sometimes I go, it's not so great.
No, that was beautiful to listen to, and to get to see your works. And man, everyone was absolutely loving it. I mean, the people really didn't drop out in terms of our normal rate. It was fantastic.
Oh, that's good. Good. I'm so pleased. I hope it was just moving enough that it was just all, No,
the images you used were so beautiful. The video
so powerful.
Went really well. And also just, like the specific geographies you talked about, we haven't really talked about in this series at all yet. And I think that was really appreciated. UC Berkeley. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, it's one of the things that we were so excited about having you here, not only because I live in Aotearoa, but because our series has been so North American focused. And so it's really fun to finally get a bit of a more global view, especially because you were telling me at the tech check, you've been in exhibitions with Stowanashi, you're having these conversations with Aboriginal artists in Australia, and you've been exhibiting in Hawaii, and it's fantastic getting a bit more in our own series, that sense of this global community and movement. Yeah,
great. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I'm glad it went well. It's it's hard. I don't know if it's because some of these things sit on screen, like, oh my God, are they looking at them? I don't even know what people are seeing. It's really hard because when you click in, I didn't know there was things saying, oh, it's recording, and I didn't know if you saw that, or I hopefully it was a nice clean screen.
Oh yeah, I guess I probably You should stop the recording.